Amelia Montgomery sat alone in the small wooden church, her white wedding dress pulled around her like a cloud against the rough-hewn pews, tears streaming down her face as she clutched a crumpled letter that had shattered her world only an hour before. The abandoned church, silent except for her quiet sobs, was a stark contrast to the celebration it should have hosted that afternoon in May of 1879. The heavy wooden door creaked open, letting in a shaft of golden New Mexico sunlight along with the silhouette of a tall man. Dust motes danced in the air between them as his spurs clinked softly against the floorboards. Amelia hurriedly wiped her tears, embarrassed to be found in such a state. The stranger removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed features and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, clearly not a guest meant for her wedding. He was a stranger, a cowboy passing through, and somehow that made her tears start afresh. "Begging your pardon, miss," he said, his voice low and gentle as he paused at the end of her pew. "I heard someone in here and thought I might pay my respects to the Lord before continuing on my way." He paused, studying her tear-stained face and the elaborate wedding dress. "Seems like I'm intruding on something private." Amelia shook her head, unable to speak through her tears. The cowboy hesitated, then sat down on the pew beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Name's August Parker," he said, placing his hat on the space between them. "I don't mean to pry, but it appears to me that someone's done you wrong today." Amelia looked up, meeting his gaze through her tears. There was something in his eyes, not pity, but understanding, that made her feel less alone. "Would you like to start over?" he asked softly. "Not the wedding necessarily, but the day. Sometimes a friendly ear can make a heavy heart a mite lighter." Amelia stared at him, this stranger who'd walked into her life at her lowest moment, offering nothing but kindness. She looked down at the letter in her hand, the letter from her fiancé explaining why he couldn't go through with the wedding, and then back at the cowboy's weathered, honest face. "Amelia," she finally said, her voice hoarse from crying. "My name is Amelia Montgomery." August smiled, and for the first time that day, Amelia felt something other than despair. It was small, just a tiny flicker, but it was there, the first hint that perhaps this wasn't the end of her story, but merely an unexpected turn in the trail. "Well, Miss Amelia Montgomery," August said, his eyes warm, "it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, though I wish it were under happier circumstances." Amelia wiped her tears with the back of her hand, suddenly aware of how she must look, her carefully arranged hair coming undone, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "He left me," she said simply, holding up the crumpled letter. "My fiancé. Or I suppose former fiancé now. We were to be married today." August's expression darkened briefly. "A man who'd leave a woman at the altar isn't worth the tears you're shedding for him. He didn't even have the courage to tell me to my face," Amelia continued, the words pouring out now. "He sent his brother with this letter not an hour before the ceremony was to begin. Said he'd received a better offer from a cattle baron in Texas. That he couldn't pass up the opportunity." She gave a bitter laugh. "4 years together, and it turns out I was just another opportunity to be weighed against others." August was quiet for a moment, his hat still in his hands. "Do you have family here? Someone I could fetch for you?" Amelia shook her head. "My parents passed 3 years ago. Influenza. I have an aunt in Boston, but she couldn't make the journey." She gestured vaguely toward the town. "There are friends, of course, but I couldn't bear to face them right now. The pity in their eyes would be unbearable." "I understand that feeling well enough," August said. "Sometimes strangers are easier to talk to than those who know us best." Amelia studied him more carefully now. He was older than her, perhaps 30 to her 22 years, with lines around his eyes that spoke of long days under the sun. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but there was a dignity about him, a quiet confidence that came from a man comfortable in his own skin. "What brings you to Silver Creek, Mr. Parker?" she asked, suddenly realizing how improper it was to be sitting alone in a church with a strange man, even if she was technically supposed to be getting married at this very moment. "August, please," he said. I'm delivering horses to a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Stopped in town for supplies and heard the church bells. I've always found peace in houses of worship, even when I've been too long away from them. He smiled slightly. Though I wasn't expecting to find a bride in distress. Former bride, Amelia corrected, looking down at her dress with sudden distaste. I should change. I feel foolish sitting here like this. There's no need to rush on my account, August said. But if you'd like, I could escort you home. The streets seem busy today, and I reckon you'd prefer to avoid too many curious eyes. Amelia felt a rush of gratitude at his understanding. That's kind of you. I live just at the edge of town, the white house with the blue shutters near the milliner's shop. August nodded and stood, offering his arm. Shall we, Miss Montgomery? Amelia hesitated only briefly before gathering her skirts and standing. You're very kind to a stranger, Mr. Parker. August, he reminded her with a gentle smile. And kindness costs nothing. My mother taught me that much before she passed. As they stepped out of the church into the bright afternoon sunlight, Amelia felt strangely exposed, like a wounded animal. The main street of Silver Creek was indeed busy, with wagons and riders passing by, shoppers moving between stores, and the usual bustle of a small but prosperous frontier town. August seemed to sense her discomfort, and positioned himself to shield her somewhat from view as they made their way down the church steps. Several passers-by stopped to stare at the unusual sight of a bride in full wedding attire being escorted by a dusty cowboy who was clearly not the expected groom. Just keep walking, August murmured. People will talk regardless of what we do. Best not to give them more to discuss than necessary. They had made it halfway down the street when a woman's voice called out. Amelia! Amelia, dear girl, wait! Amelia tensed as Mrs. Winters, the wife of the town's only doctor and one of her closest friends, hurried toward them, concern etched on her kind face. Oh, my dear, Mrs. Winters said, reaching for Amelia's hands. I've just heard what happened. That scoundrel! How dare he treat you this way? Amelia felt fresh tears threatening. I can't talk about it now, Mrs. Winters. Please. Mrs. Winters glanced curiously at August, who tipped his hat politely but remained silent. Of course, dear, Mrs. Winters said, squeezing Amelia's hands. You come see me when you're ready. Day or night. Thank you. Amelia managed, grateful for the woman's kindness but desperate to escape. As they continued down the street, more curious glances followed them, and Amelia could practically feel the whispers beginning. By nightfall, the entire town would know of her humiliation. Almost there, August said encouragingly as they turned onto the side street where Amelia lived. The white clapboard house with its cheerful blue shutters had never looked so welcoming. Amelia hurried up the short path to the front door, fumbling with the key with trembling hands. Once inside, she turned to August, who had remained respectfully on the porch. Would you like to come in? I could make some coffee as a small thanks for your kindness. August hesitated, clearly weighing propriety against courtesy. Perhaps just for a moment. Though I should warn you, I've been on the trail for days, and I'm not fit for polite company. Amelia managed a small smile. I think we're well past concerns of propriety today, don't you? Besides, after what just happened, I doubt my reputation could suffer much more damage. August stepped inside, removing his hat once more. The small front room was neat and modestly furnished, with a sofa, 2 chairs, and a small table. Photographs in simple frames adorned the mantel, and a bookshelf held a respectable collection of volumes. Please sit, Amelia said, gesturing to one of the chairs. I need to change out of this dress. Take your time, August replied, settling into the chair and placing his hat on his knee. Amelia retreated to her bedroom, closing the door behind her with a sigh of relief. She leaned against it for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. The events of the day seemed almost unreal, like a terrible dream she couldn't wake from. With shaking hands, she began to undo the long row of buttons down the back of her wedding dress, struggling to reach the ones between her shoulder blades. After several frustrating minutes, she gave up and sank onto the edge of her bed, fresh tears threatening. A gentle knock at the door startled her. "Miss Montgomery? Is everything all right?" "I can't," she began, her voice breaking. "The buttons. I can't reach them all." There was a pause. "Would you like me to fetch a neighbor woman to help you?" Amelia considered this but couldn't bear the thought of facing anyone else from town just yet. "There's no one nearby who wouldn't ask questions I can't answer right now." Another pause. "I understand. Perhaps I should go, then. I can come back later or no," Amelia said quickly, surprising herself. "No, please don't go." She took a deep breath. "If it's not too improper. Could you help me? Just with the buttons I can't reach. I can manage the rest myself." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Then, August's voice, low and respectful. "If you're certain, Miss Montgomery." Amelia opened the door just enough to look out at him. "I'm certain. And please call me Amelia. After all this, formality seems rather pointless." August nodded, his expression serious. "As you wish, Amelia." She turned her back to him, gathering her hair over one shoulder to give him access to the row of tiny pearl buttons. She felt his presence behind her, careful not to stand too close. "Just the ones at the top, if you would," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can reach the rest." His fingers worked quickly and efficiently, never lingering, maintaining a respectful distance as much as possible. "There," he said after a moment. "That should be enough for you to manage the rest." "Thank you," Amelia said, not turning around until she heard him step back into the hallway. "I'll wait in the front room," he said, and she heard his footsteps retreating. Alone again, Amelia finished removing the wedding dress, carefully hanging it in her wardrobe, though she knew she would never wear it again. She washed her face in the basin on her dresser, the cool water refreshing against her tear-stained skin, and changed into a simple blue day dress. When she returned to the front room, August was standing by the bookshelf, examining her collection. "You're fond of reading," he observed as she entered. "Yes," Amelia replied, feeling oddly self-conscious. "My father was the schoolteacher here before he passed. He believed education was important for everyone, daughters included." August nodded approvingly. "A wise man." "My own schooling was limited, but I've tried to educate myself when possible." Amelia moved to the small kitchen area. "Please sit down. I'll make that coffee I promised." As she busied herself with the coffee pot and stove, she found herself grateful for the simple, familiar task. It gave her hands something to do and her mind something to focus on besides her shattered wedding plans. "How long have you lived in Silver Creek?" August asked, settling back into the chair. "All my life," Amelia replied, measuring coffee grounds into the pot. "My parents moved here when I was just a baby. My father took the teaching position, and my mother helped run the general store until her health began to fail." "It seems like a nice town," August observed. Amelia gave a small, bitter laugh. "It is, mostly. Though I imagine it will feel considerably less welcoming now. People's memories are shorter than you might think," August said. "And those worth keeping close won't judge you for another's failings." "Perhaps," Amelia said, unconvinced. "And what about you? Where do you call home?" August was quiet for a moment. "Nowhere in particular these days. I was born in Tennessee, but my family moved west when I was young. Lost my parents in a cholera outbreak when I was 16. Been on my own since then, working where I can find it. The last few years, I've been breaking and training horses for various ranches between here and Colorado." "That sounds lonely," Amelia said softly, bringing 2 cups of coffee to the table. "It can be," August acknowledged, accepting the cup with a nod of thanks. "But there's a certain freedom to it as well. The open country has its own kind of company, if you learn to listen for it." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, sipping their coffee. Amelia found herself studying August's face, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar near his right eyebrow, the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he spoke. There was something solid about him, reliable in a way that made her feel grounded when everything else seemed to be spinning out of control. "What will you do now?" August asked finally. Amelia stared into her coffee cup, the question catching her off guard though she should have expected it. "I don't know," she admitted. "I haven't had time to think that far ahead. I suppose I'll continue teaching at the school, as I have been." "You're the school teacher?" August asked, looking impressed. "Yes, for the past 3 years since Father passed. It's not what I had planned for today and beyond, but—" She trailed off, the reality of her situation hitting her anew. "Everything's changed now." "Change isn't always for the worse," August said gently. "Though I recognize that's cold comfort at the moment." Amelia nodded, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. "The most foolish part is that I'm not even sure I loved him anymore. Thomas and I grew up together, and marriage seemed the natural progression. But these past months he'd been different. Distant. I told myself it was just nervousness about the wedding, but perhaps he'd already been planning his escape. His loss," August said firmly. "A man who'd abandon a woman like you doesn't deserve a second thought." Amelia looked up, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," August replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "I know you faced public humiliation with dignity. I know you've shown kindness to a dusty stranger when you had every reason to shut the world out. I know you've built a life here that means something. Teaching children, carrying on your father's legacy, that's no small thing." Warmth spread through Amelia's chest at his words, easing some of the tightness that had been there since receiving Thomas's letter. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything today." August finished his coffee and set the cup down. "I should be going. I need to reach the Hartley ranch before nightfall with those horses." "Of course," Amelia said, feeling a strange reluctance to see him leave. This kind stranger who had appeared when she needed someone most. "The Hartley place is about 2 hours' ride north, if memory serves." August nodded, rising from his chair and picking up his hat. "That's the one. Old man Hartley is expanding his breeding stock, wanted some Tennessee Walker blood mixed in." Amelia walked him to the door, suddenly uncertain what to say. How did one properly thank a stranger for such unexpected kindness? August paused at the threshold, turning to face her. "Miss Montgomery, Amelia, I hope tomorrow brings you easier breathing and clearer skies. When will you be returning to town?" Amelia asked, the question slipping out before she could consider its impropriety. A small smile played at the corners of August's mouth. "I'll be at the Hartley ranch for about a week, helping settle the new horses. After that, I plan to head back south. Perhaps." Amelia hesitated, then continued with more courage than she felt. "Perhaps you might stop in town on your way. I make a decent apple pie, and I still owe you a proper thank you for your kindness today." August's smile widened, bringing a warmth to his eyes that made Amelia's heart beat a little faster. "I'd like that very much." "A week from today, then?" Amelia nodded, returning his smile with a small one of her own. "A week from today." After August left, Amelia closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The day had begun with such different expectations. She should have been Mrs. Thomas Blackwood by now, celebrating with friends and neighbors, embarking on a new chapter of her life. Instead, she was alone in her childhood home, abandoned by the man she'd planned to marry, with nothing to look forward to except, perhaps, a visit from a kind stranger in a week's time. It wasn't much, but somehow, it was enough to get through this day. Tomorrow, she would face the town and its whispers. Tomorrow, she would begin rebuilding her life. But for now, she allowed herself to remember the gentle way August had looked at her, not with pity but with respect, and found that the ache in her chest had eased, just a little. The week that followed was every bit as difficult as Amelia had feared. Returning to the schoolhouse on Monday morning required every ounce of courage she possessed. The children, bless them, were mostly oblivious to adult dramas, though a few of the older ones gave her curious looks. It was the parents who were harder to face, the mothers who offered sympathetic smiles and the fathers who awkwardly avoided her gaze. Mrs. Winters proved a true friend, visiting daily with food or simply to sit and talk. She never pressed Amelia for details about what had happened with Thomas, instead offering practical advice about how to hold her head high and weather the storm of gossip. "It will pass," Mrs. Winters assured her over tea on Wednesday afternoon. "Something new will capture their attention soon enough. The Richardson girl is expecting, I hear, and well before her wedding date next month. That should provide ample fodder for the gossips." Amelia felt a twinge of sympathy for young Sarah Richardson, even as she acknowledged the selfish relief that someone else's scandal might overshadow her own. "I just wish I understood why," Amelia confessed, staring into her teacup. "4 years together, and he throws it all away for a position with some cattle baron in Texas? It makes no sense." Mrs. Winters hesitated, setting down her own cup with careful precision. "Amelia, dear, I wasn't going to mention this, but perhaps knowing might help you move forward. There are rumors that Thomas had been spending time with Rebecca Sullivan when he traveled to Santa Fe on business these past months." Amelia felt as though she'd been doused with cold water. Rebecca Sullivan was the daughter of one of the wealthiest merchants in the territory. If Thomas had been courting her while still engaged to Amelia— "I see," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "So it wasn't just about a job opportunity." Mrs. Winters reached across the table to pat Amelia's hand. "I'm sorry, my dear. I thought you should know, rather than wonder. And if it's any consolation, I think you've had a narrow escape. A man capable of such deception would not have made a good husband." Amelia nodded, finding that the news, while painful, didn't devastate her as it might have a week ago. Instead, it clarified things, helping her see that what she'd lost wasn't the great love she'd imagined, but rather a comfortable arrangement with a man who had been willing to lie to her face for months. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. "It helps, oddly enough." As the week progressed, Amelia found herself thinking of August more and more. She wondered how he was faring at the Hartley ranch, if the horses were settling in well, if he was thinking of her at all. It was foolish, she knew, to dwell on a man she'd met for barely an hour during the worst moment of her life. And yet she couldn't help but look forward to his promised visit. On Saturday, Amelia rose early and cleaned her small house from top to bottom, though it hardly needed it. She baked an apple pie, using the last of her stored winter apples, and took extra care with her appearance, choosing a blue dress that her mother had once told her brought out the color of her eyes. All day, she found herself glancing out the window at the slightest sound, her heart racing whenever a horse passed by on the road. By late afternoon, when August still hadn't appeared, she began to chide herself for her foolishness. He was a drifter, a man passing through. He had probably forgotten his casual promise to a weeping woman in a church. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her small front garden, Amelia forced herself to accept that August wasn't coming. She was just about to put away the extra plate she'd set out when she heard the distinctive sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her heart leapt as she hurried to the window. There, dismounting from a handsome chestnut horse, was August. He looked different from how she remembered, cleaner, for one thing, his clothes less trail-worn. He'd trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, and as he approached her door, hat in hand, Amelia was struck by how handsome he was. She smoothed her dress and took a deep breath before opening the door just as he raised his hand to knock. "Mr. Parker," she said, suddenly shy. "You came." August's smile was warm, reaching all the way to his eyes. "I promised I would. And please, it's August." "August," she repeated, stepping back to let him in. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten." "Not a chance," he said, entering and removing his hat. "The work at Hartley's took longer than expected. One of the Maras went into labor early, and I couldn't leave until I was sure she and the foal were stable. Are they all right? Amelia asked, genuinely concerned. August nodded. Both doing well, though it was touch and go for a while. The foal is a fine little filly with her mother's spirit, and her sire's coloring. Hartley's beside himself with joy. Amelia smiled, finding his enthusiasm for the horses endearing. I'm glad to hear it. Please sit down. Are you hungry? I've made a pie, as promised, but I also have some stew if you'd like something more substantial first. Stew sounds wonderful, August admitted. I left Hartley's at first light and haven't stopped except to rest the horse. As Amelia busied herself in the kitchen, ladling rich beef stew into bowls, she felt August's eyes on her. It wasn't an uncomfortable sensation, quite the opposite. There was something reassuring about his presence, solid and undemanding. How have you been? He asked as she placed a bowl in front of him, along with a thick slice of fresh bread. This past week, I mean. Amelia sat across from him with her own, smaller portion. It's been difficult, she admitted, but survivable. The townspeople have been as kind as can be expected, though the gossip has been exactly as unpleasant as I anticipated. August's expression darkened. People should mind their own business. It's a small town, Amelia said with a small shrug. Gossip is the primary form of entertainment. And to be fair, a jilted bride is quite the story. You're more than a story, August said firmly, his eyes meeting hers across the table. You're a woman of remarkable strength, from what I've seen. Amelia felt heat rise to her cheeks at his directness. You give me too much credit. I've spent plenty of time crying this week. Tears don't negate strength, August replied, breaking off a piece of bread. Sometimes they're proof of it. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Amelia watching with satisfaction as August devoured the stew with obvious appreciation. This is delicious, he said between bites. Best meal I've had in months. You're too kind, Amelia said, pleased nonetheless. It's just a simple stew. Nothing simple about good cooking, August countered. My own attempts over a campfire would make you weep for different reasons entirely. Amelia laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she had genuinely laughed? Before Thomas's betrayal, certainly, but even before that, their relationship had grown strained in ways she'd been unwilling to acknowledge. So, August said, finishing the last of his stew. What comes next for you, Amelia Montgomery? She considered the question, finding that the answer came more easily than it had a week ago. I'll continue teaching, of course. The children need me, and I find I need them too, their honesty, their enthusiasm. Beyond that. She paused, thinking. I suppose I'll build a different life than the one I'd planned. A life that's wholly mine. August nodded, his expression thoughtful. That sounds like a fine plan. Though I hope you won't close yourself off entirely to other possibilities. Their eyes met across the table, and Amelia felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with grief or heartbreak. What about you? She asked, her voice softer than she'd intended. Where will you go after this? August set down his spoon, his expression growing more serious. That's partly why I wanted to see you today. I've accepted a position with Hartley. You're staying? Amelia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. August nodded. Hartley's getting older, and his son's more interested in politics than ranching. He needs someone to help manage the place, particularly the horse breeding program. It's good work, steady, with a small cabin of my own on the property. That's wonderful, Amelia said, genuinely pleased for him. So you'll be near Silver Creek for a while then? I will, August confirmed, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Near enough to ride into town occasionally. Perhaps on Sundays, when a certain schoolteacher might have time for company. Amelia felt her cheeks warm again, but she held his gaze. I think that schoolteacher would enjoy such company very much. The evening passed quickly after that, filled with easy conversation as they shared pieces of their lives. August told stories of his travels, the breathtaking vistas of Colorado, the vast emptiness of the Texas plains, the bustling energy of Kansas City. Amelia shared tales of her students, the triumphs and challenges of teaching children of all ages in one small schoolhouse. As the clock on the mantel chimed 9, August reluctantly stood. I should be getting back to the ranch. Hartley will be wondering what's become of me. Amelia walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him go. Thank you for coming. It's been a lovely evening. August paused at the threshold, turning to face her. In the warm lamplight, his eyes were a deep brown with flecks of gold, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Amelia, he said, his voice low. I know we've only just met, and you've been through a terrible ordeal. I don't want to push where I'm not wanted. But I'd very much like to call on you properly if you'd allow it. Amelia felt a warmth spreading through her chest at his words. I'd like that very much, August. His smile was like the sunrise, gradual and brightening. Then I'll see you next Sunday? Perhaps we could attend church together, if that wouldn't cause too much talk. Amelia considered this. Appearing in church with August would indeed set tongues wagging again, but she found she cared less about that than she might have a week ago. I'd be honored to attend church with you, she said. Though I should warn you, you'll be subjected to quite a bit of scrutiny and probably some impertinent questions. August chuckled. I reckon I can handle a few nosy townspeople. I've faced worse in my time. He hesitated, then reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, warm against her skin as he raised her hand to his lips and placed a gentle kiss on her knuckles. Until Sunday, then, he said, releasing her hand and stepping back. Amelia stood in the doorway, watching as he mounted his horse and rode away, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the night. Only when he had disappeared from view did she close the door, leaning against it with a small, wondering smile. For the first time since receiving Thomas's letter, Amelia felt something like hope blooming in her chest, not the comfortable, predictable future she had planned with Thomas, but something new and unexpected. Something that, perhaps, might be even better. True to his word, August arrived at Amelia's door the following Sunday morning, dressed in his best clothes, a clean white shirt, dark waistcoat, and polished boots. He'd taken extra care with his appearance, and Amelia felt a flutter of pleasure knowing it was for her benefit. The church was already filling when they arrived, and a hush fell over the congregation as they entered together. Amelia felt the weight of curious stares but found, with August beside her, that they bothered her less than expected. They took a seat near the back, and within moments, Mrs. Winters appeared, sliding into the pew beside Amelia with a warm smile. Good morning, dear, she said, then turned her attention to August. And you must be Mr. Parker. I've heard so much about you. August looked surprised, and Amelia felt her cheeks grow warm. Mrs. Winters is a dear friend, she explained quickly. She's been very supportive this past week. A pleasure to meet you, madam, August said, tipping his hat respectfully. Mrs. Winters beamed at him. The pleasure is mine, young man. Anyone who brings a smile back to our Amelia's face is welcome in Silver Creek, as far as I'm concerned. The service began before further conversation could embarrass Amelia, though she noticed several heads turning to look at them throughout the sermon. Reverend Matthews spoke of forgiveness and new beginnings, and Amelia couldn't help but feel the message was particularly apt for her current situation. After the service, there was no avoiding the curious townspeople. Mrs. Sullivan, the town's most notorious gossip, made a beeline for them as they exited the church. Amelia, dear, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. How wonderful to see you out and about. And with company, no less. Won't you introduce us? Amelia straightened her shoulders, feeling August's steady presence beside her. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Mr. August Parker. He's recently taken a position at the Hartley Ranch. August, Mrs. Sullivan is our local historian. She couldn't quite keep the dry note from her voice. August shook the woman's hand politely. Madam. Mrs. Sullivan's eyes gleamed with undisguised curiosity. And how did you two become acquainted? I don't recall seeing you at the event that was to take place last weekend. Before Amelia could respond, August spoke up, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. I had the honor of meeting Miss Montgomery by chance. Sometimes the good Lord puts people in our path just when we need them most. Mrs. Sullivan looked momentarily taken aback by his directness, but recovered quickly. How providential. And will you be staying in our little town long, Mr. Parker? As long as I'm needed at the Hartley Ranch, August replied. And perhaps longer, depending on how things develop. His gaze shifted briefly to Amelia, a warmth in his eyes that wasn't lost on Mrs. Sullivan or anyone else watching. Amelia felt a rush of gratitude for his tact and his willingness to face the town's curiosity head-on. If you'll excuse us, Mrs. Sullivan, she said, I promise to show Mr. Parker around town after the service. As they walked away, Amelia heard the immediate buzz of whispered conversation behind them and suppressed a smile. Let them talk. For once, she found she didn't mind being the subject of gossip if it meant having August by her side. They spent the rest of the day together, walking through town as Amelia pointed out places of interest: the schoolhouse where she taught, the general store where her mother had once worked, the small creek that gave the town its name. August listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest in her life and the community she called home. As the sun began to set, they found themselves back at Amelia's house, lingering on the front porch, reluctant for the day to end. Thank you for today, Amelia said softly. For facing the gossips with me, for everything. August smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she was coming to cherish. It was my pleasure, truly. Though I'm sorry if my presence stirred up more talk. Let them talk, Amelia said with newfound conviction. I'm finding I care less about what others think than I used to. That's a valuable lesson, August said. One I learned the hard way many years ago. Will you tell me about it someday? Amelia asked, genuinely curious about the experiences that had shaped this thoughtful, kind man. Someday, August promised. We have time. The simple statement carried a weight of meaning that made Amelia's heart beat faster. Yes, she agreed. I believe we do. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant pattern. August rode into town every Sunday to attend church with Amelia, staying for dinner afterward. Sometimes they would walk around town or sit on her porch swing talking until the stars came out. Other times, when the weather permitted, August would bring his horse and a gentle mare borrowed from Hartley's stable, and they would ride out into the countryside, enjoying picnics by the creek or under the shade of cottonwood trees. June gave way to July, and the summer heat settled over Silver Creek like a heavy blanket. Amelia's school term ended, giving her more free time, some of which she spent visiting August at the Hartley Ranch. Old Mr. Hartley took to her immediately, declaring her a sensible girl with a good head on her shoulders, and inviting her to Sunday dinners at the main house. It was during one such dinner in late July that Mr. Hartley made an announcement that would change everything. I've been thinking, he said, setting down his fork and looking at August across the table. This ranch is too big for an old man like me to manage, even with your help, son. My boy's set on that political career of his in Santa Fe, and his wife wouldn't know a branding iron from a butter knife. August nodded, waiting for the old man to continue. What this place needs is a proper manager, someone with a stake in its future. Hartley reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document, sliding it across the table to August. I'm offering you a partnership. 20% of the ranch now, with the option to buy more over time. August stared at the document, speechless. Amelia, sitting beside him, felt her heart swell with pride and happiness for him. Mr. Hartley, August finally managed. This is incredibly generous, but it's not charity. Hartley interrupted gruffly. It's good business. You've doubled the value of my horse stock in just a few months. You've got away with the animals and the men both. I'm not getting any younger, and I want to know this place will be in good hands when I'm gone. August carefully unfolded the document, his eyes scanning the legal language. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Hartley said simply. But there's one condition. His eyes twinkled as he glanced between August and Amelia. A ranch this size needs a woman's touch. That cabin of yours is fine for a bachelor, but a partner in the Hartley ranch should have a proper home. Amelia felt her cheeks flush as August's gaze shifted to her, a question in his eyes that made her heart race. I was thinking, Hartley continued, seemingly oblivious to the charged moment he'd created, that we could expand the old foreman's house. It's been empty since Jenkins retired last year, and with some work, it would make a fine family home. August cleared his throat, still looking at Amelia. That's something to consider, certainly. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur for Amelia, her mind spinning with the implications of Hartley's offer and the look she'd seen in August's eyes. It was too soon, surely. They'd known each other barely 2 months. And yet, hadn't she known Thomas for years and still been blind to his true character? As August drove her home that evening in Hartley's buggy, a comfortable silence settled between them. The night was warm, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The rhythmic sound of hooves on the packed dirt rode the only sound. He's a good man, Hartley, August said finally as they approached the outskirts of town. Gruff but fair. That offer. It's more than I ever expected. You deserve it, Amelia said sincerely. I've seen how hard you work, how the hands respect you. The ranch is thriving under your care. August glanced at her, the moonlight casting shadows across his features. And what about his other suggestion? About the foreman's house? Amelia's heart skipped a beat. What about it? August drew the buggy to a halt outside her home but made no move to help her down. Instead, he turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. Amelia, he said, his voice low and serious. I know it hasn't been long. I know you were hurt, badly, and I would never want to rush you into something you're not ready for. But these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Amelia's throat tightened with emotion. Mine too, she whispered. August squeezed her hands gently. I'm not Thomas. I can't offer you a life of ease or social standing. What I can offer is this, a partnership, in every sense of the word. A life built together day by day. Hard work, certainly, but joy too, and respect always. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, but they were different from the tears she'd shed in the church that day in May. These were tears of a different kind entirely. Are you asking what I think you're asking? She managed, her voice trembling slightly. August smiled, releasing one of her hands to reach into his pocket. I am. I had planned to wait, to give you more time, but after tonight. He pulled out a small ring, simple but beautiful, a single pearl set in silver. This was my mother's. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right woman to give it to. He slid from the buggy seat to kneel beside it, still holding her hand, the ring held up in the moonlight. Amelia Montgomery, would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need a husband or I need a wife, but because I love you, and I believe we could build something beautiful together. Amelia stared at him, this man who had walked into her life on what should have been the worst day of it, and somehow turned it into the beginning of something wonderful. She thought of the way he listened when she spoke, how he respected her mind and her independence, how his eyes lit up when she entered a room. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. Yes, August Parker, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to join her in the buggy once more. Cupping her face gently in his hands, he leaned forward and kissed her for the first time, a kiss full of promise and tenderness that made Amelia's heart sing. When they finally parted, August rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Amelia. I think I've loved you since that first day in the church, when you had every reason to shut the world out but instead showed such courage. I love you too, Amelia whispered, the words feeling right and true. Not because you rescued me when I was at my lowest, but because of who you are every day since kind, honest, steadfast. They sat together in the moonlight for a long time, talking of their future, the renovations they would make to the foreman's house, how Amelia might continue teaching while also helping with the ranch accounts, their hopes and dreams for the life they would build together. When August finally walked her to her door, Amelia felt as though she were floating, her heart so full it might burst. She looked down at the pearl ring on her finger, thinking of how differently things had turned out than she'd expected that day in May. "What are you thinking?" August asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Amelia smiled up at him. "I was thinking about starting over. About how sometimes what seems like an ending is really just the beginning of something far better than we could have imagined." August nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm grateful every day that I decided to stop at that church. That I saw you there and couldn't just walk away." "As am I," Amelia said softly. "As am I." They were married in the same small church where they had first met, on a bright September morning with the aspens beginning to turn gold in the distant mountains. Unlike her planned wedding to Thomas, this ceremony was simple and intimate, with only close friends in attendance, Mrs. Winters beaming proudly in the front pew, Old Man Hartley standing as August's best man, and a few other townspeople who had shown true friendship to Amelia during her difficult time. As Amelia walked down the aisle toward August, she wore not the elaborate white gown that had been meant for her wedding to Thomas, but a new dress of pale blue silk that matched her eyes. August watched her approach with such love and pride that she felt her heart might overflow with happiness. The Reverend spoke of new beginnings and God's plan, of how paths that seem darkest often lead to unexpected light. When it came time for their vows, August took Amelia's hands in his and spoke words that were entirely his own. "Amelia, when I found you that day, I was a drifter with no place to call home. You gave me a reason to stay, to put down roots, to believe in possibilities I'd long since abandoned. I promised to love you faithfully and completely all the days of my life. To be your partner in all things, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, to build a life of purpose and joy together." Tears slipped down Amelia's cheeks as she spoke her own vows. "August, you came into my life when I thought all hope was lost, and showed me that endings can become beginnings. I promise to love you with all my heart, to stand by your side through whatever life brings us, to create a home filled with laughter and kindness, to be your faithful wife and friend until my last breath." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, August kissed her with a tenderness that made the small congregation break into spontaneous applause. As they walked back down the aisle together, Amelia caught sight of the pew where she had sat crying that day in May, and felt a surge of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought August to her side. The foreman's house on the Hartley ranch had been transformed in the weeks leading up to the wedding. With August's carpentry skills and help from the ranch hands, the small but sturdy structure had been expanded to include a proper kitchen, a cozy sitting room, and 2 bedrooms. "One for us, and one for the future," August had said with a wink that made Amelia blush. They spent their wedding night there, christening their new home with love and laughter. As they lay together in the quiet darkness afterward, August's arms around her, and his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, Amelia knew she had found where she truly belonged. "Happy?" August murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Completely," Amelia replied, tilting her head to look up at him. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You know, when I rode into Silver Creek that day, I never imagined I'd be staying. I certainly never imagined I'd find a wife, a home, a future." "Life has a way of surprising you," Amelia said thoughtfully. "Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes—" she pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Sometimes for the infinitely better." The years that followed proved the truth of her words. The Hartley Ranch prospered under August's management, its reputation for fine horses spreading throughout the territory. Amelia continued teaching for a time, until the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor after August's mother. 2 years later they welcomed a son, William, named for Amelia's father. Old Man Hartley, who lived to the ripe age of 82, doted on both children as if they were his own grandchildren. By the time he passed peacefully in his sleep in 1889, August had acquired a 50% stake in the ranch, which was formally renamed the Hartley Parker Ranch in the old man's will. Life wasn't always easy. There were harsh winters that threatened the stock, dry summers that withered the grazing lands, financial hardships when cattle prices fell. But through it all, August and Amelia faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and they sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, August would take Amelia's hand, still wearing his mother's pearl ring alongside her wedding band, and they would remember that day in the church, when a heartbroken bride and a wandering cowboy found each other against all odds. "Do you ever regret it?" August asked her once, on their 10th anniversary. "Marrying me instead of the life you'd planned?" Amelia looked at him, this man who had been her rock, her partner, her lover, the father of her children, and shook her head with absolute certainty. "Never," she said. "Not for a single moment." And it was true. For all the tears she had shed that day in the church, for all the humiliation and heartbreak, Amelia knew now that it had been the best thing that could have happened to her. It had led her to August, to a love deeper and truer than anything she could have imagined, to a life rich with purpose and joy. It had taught her the most valuable lesson of all, that sometimes, the end of one dream is simply the beginning of a better one. That sometimes, all it takes is the courage to start over.